Formula One is known for its extensive rulebook, and it's looking likely that there will be some big changes made to it. The Formula One Commission will meet at Spa-Francorchamps on July 28th. This meeting's conclusion might create a precedent. The most essential things on the agenda are tyres, engines, gearboxes, and the budget cap. Could we see a complete overhaul of some of the rules? There are numerous rules and thus flaws in the billion-dollar game of Formula One, and far too many people are interested in cleaning them up. The Formula One Commission will convene in Spa to debate and vote on system flaws. Each of the 10 teams has one vote, while the FIA and Formula One each have 10. Some judgment requires 28 votes, while others just require 25. This meeting agenda also includes easy subjects. Formula One intends to communicate to the teams their ideas for the 6 sprint events in 2024, where and how they will take place. The format will also be tweaked once more. It is possible that the free practice and sprint shootout will be held on Friday. On Saturday, the sprint and qualifying for the main race would take place. One of the bigger rule changes that could be regarded is the tyre blanket. To avoid the ban on heated tyres, at least 5 teams must vote to preserve the current generation of tyres. The introduction of tyres that must be run without artificial preheating will thus be delayed for a year or forever. The choice here also indicates which tyre manufacturer will supply Formula One in the future. Pirelli would have a greater chance of winning the bidding battle if the new tyres were to be deployed in 2024, or if the prohibition on heated blankets were to be delayed for only 1 year. If the trial without electric blankets is postponed without a specific date, Bridgestone is likely to win the bid. Concerning engines, Alpine has made a request to driving partner Renault. Despite engine development being halted, the French discovered that their power disadvantage had quadrupled in a year. The alleged power deficit is 30 horsepower, which translates into a 3/10 disadvantage on the racetrack. Mercedes, Ferrari, and Honda are suspected of using last year's shutdown of reliability issues to discover performance through the back door. The FIA has committed to investigate. In the spirit of fair opportunity, Renault now wants to be permitted to catch up to the competition to within 5 kilowatts, or 8 brake horsepower. Either by redevelopment or by raising the flow rate, Renault argues that the development freeze has a concession to Red Bull when Honda declared its withdrawal. Because Honda only intended to lease the intellectual rights to the 2020 engine and restrict further development, all other engine manufacturers were required to join a freeze to safeguard Red Bull. Christian Horner, the team's owner, has previously stated that Red Bull would back the Alpine idea. Horner told following Red Bull's record-breaking 12th consecutive win at the Hungarian Grand Prix, "I think it's a matter of seeing what the deficits are. I think the FIA have all of the data, and they should present exactly what the differences are. That would be fascinating for everybody to see, and I think if there is a deficit under homologation, then it's something that we should be sensible about. Otherwise, you're locked in for 2 years. So I wouldn't be adverse to a sensible discussion." Christian Horner highlighted that when a team has a large gap due to engine speed, action must be taken by the teams. Safnauer agreed, saying part of the agreement was also that if a party fell outside the 1% margin, we would have honest discussions on how to eliminate that gap. Renault has so requested that the engine be permitted to be boosted during the freeze. This is to prevent poor outcomes and achieve greater progress. There's also an issue with the gearbox. All teams except for Aston Martin, Williams, and Haas currently make their own gearboxes. Mercedes provide the cassette and innards to Aston Martin and Williams, while Ferrari provides the cassette and innards to Haas. As a result, there is technological and political dependence. They're aiming to eliminate the potential of blackmailing the large teams, since it's now not possible for gearbox customers to swap to another manufacturer's cassette without making changes to the car. To make switching to a different supplier easier, the FIA is now recommending cassettes with standard dimensions for everybody. The major teams are fighting back. Dependencies provide benefits to them, such as more revenue. And then, probably the biggest possible change has to be with the cap x budget cap. The budget cap is a never-ending abyss, not just because of the numerous loopholes. In Spa, capital investments are being negotiated. The existing 4-year maximum of $36 million will be raised to allow teams with antiquated infrastructure to purchase new tools and catch up with the others. There are 2 alternatives available, $50 million or $80 million. Williams and Sauber will have to invest substantially more money to prepare for the future. They're now seeking for allies. There are roughly 5 votes to be found here as well. The competition, on the other hand, only ever gives them as much as they're willing to invest. Alpine, for example, is looking into purchasing a simulator and test benches for gears and brakes. 50 million would be enough for us, squad manager Otmar Safnauer reckons. Williams squad manager James Vowles is hoping for a settlement of between $50 and $80 million. The issue of more capex headroom under FIA financial regulations has surfaced in recent months as a means of seeking to level the playing field, and any decision might have a big influence on Grand Prix racing in future years. Over the weekend in Budapest, a new notion surfaced that will see the FIA analyse and approve the individual requirements of teams on a case-by-case basis, rather than providing all teams the identical option to spend more. The ideas will be reviewed at a meeting of F1's Financial Advisory Council. A final vote of team principals will be held at Friday's F1 Commission meeting in Spa, albeit there is now a governance debate over whether the issue requires a simple majority of 5 teams or a supermajority of 8 teams. Since the introduction of the financial regulations, the subject has become a source of contention because teams that were previously underfunded and whose infrastructure lagged that of wealthier competitors have found themselves unable to spend what they need on new facilities, making it more difficult for them to close the performance gap. Teams such as Williams, McLaren, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri and Alpine will have diverse requirements and have been eager to see an additional allotment that would allow them to invest in the type of infrastructure required to compete continuously at the top level. Within the financial restrictions, a specific exception has already been created for investment in new wind tunnels, allowing both Aston Martin and McLaren to commence on the projects that are already taking shape at their respective plant locations. Teams, on the other hand, want to update infrastructure like simulators, gearbox dynos and rigs to compete with Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari, and have been lobbying for a method to be permitted to make these additional expenditures. The difficulty in striking an agreement is that the established top teams are naturally cautious of assisting competitors in becoming stronger. Meanwhile, other upgraders argue that if the major teams get the same extra money, they will just spend it on even better equipment, maintaining the status quo. In effect, they want a sliding scale similar to that for aero testing, with teams in need receiving more budgetary leeway than those at the top, maybe with previous financial data used to help assess how such a system could operate. Another point of view is that the best teams already have all they need, and that if the allowance is the same for everyone, any further investment in new equipment would result in minimal advantages compared to the benefits accessible to teams who have fallen behind the times. Finding a mechanism to assist just those teams in need of infrastructure support has been a source of contention. Williams manager James Vowles, whose staff is the most affected by the outmoded facilities at Grove, remains optimistic that a solution can be found. "I think there's good discussions, let's put it that way," Vowles said. "It isn't that we're sat here not having a good discussions. We are, but it's where the compromise or the complexity is, and we're trying to find a system that works for everyone. And that's becoming awfully difficult at the moment, because, and rightly so, each team has its own particular set of requirements for this." According to Vowles, there are now essentially 2 options, with the latest idea being examine each team's needs for individual upgrading projects and grant a capex limit appropriately. There's a FAC taking place on Monday, which I think will be a very good starting point to discuss. Really, what I'd say is one of 2 options on the table, Vowles said. One is just a blank, let's raise the capex amount, the same for everyone, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're catching up. But really the amount that Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari can spend is significantly less than the amount we can, as in they already have facilities beyond your dreams, so I think it will allow an amount of catch-up. And the second is a list of mechanism, where the FIA will come around and will say, "Look, we're missing this is out of date," and they'll tick the boxes and say, "There you go, there's X million." In practice, there will be transparency, since the additional funds will be awarded to specific initiatives that teams choose to pursue. That's what I like about it. It's a bit more understood, Vowles added. Both options have pros and cons, but you'll already notice by the nature of that we're trying to find something that works for everyone. It's always going to be difficult. Outside of the established top players, other team managers want additional spending power. "There's a couple of options in terms of how you change this regulatory framework," said McLaren's Andrea Stella. "In general, we are supportive of a little expansion of the expenditure. Currently, our situation is that we will agree to this, stated AlphaTauri's Franz Tost, because I think that the infrastructure is a very important performance differentiator, and if you have more money to spend there, this will also help to increase the performance of the car. Therefore, we're in favour of it. Alpine team principal Otmar Szafnauer is likewise eager to see a capex allowance implemented, as the Enstone outfit is planning a significant gearbox dyno project. However, Szafnauer admits that certain competitors require further assistance. "We don't need as much as some others," he said. "When the FIA asked me what we would vote for, I'm not selfish to say I just want what I want and you guys can't. What it is about is having it be a level playing field. There are a couple of scenarios on the table now, and I hear there may be a third in the meeting, so I'll vote accordingly. It just needs to be a level playing field. The infrastructure that we have and the tools that we have are really important to find performance, and we need to have similar tools. So what are your thoughts on the proposed changes? Do you think it's good for F1? And could an increased extra budget really level the playing field in upcoming years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching today's video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to ensure you're up to date with all the latest F1 news.